I never imagined that an unexpected invitation would lead me to the mysterious Blackwood Abbey. The letter arrived one chilly autumn morning, sealed with an ornate wax stamp bearing the emblem of a raven. It was from a distant relative, someone I had never met, requesting my presence at the family estate. Curiosity piqued, I packed my bags and set off on a journey to the secluded abbey, nestled deep within the Blackwood forest. As I approached the estate, the abbey's imposing silhouette loomed against the darkening sky. The ancient stone walls were covered in creeping ivy, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. A sense of unease settled over me, but I couldn't turn back. The carriage creaked to a halt, and I stepped out, feeling the weight of the abbey's history pressing down on me. Inside, the abbey was as grand as it was eerie. High vaulted ceilings, dimly lit corridors, and antique furniture created an atmosphere of faded opulence. The caretaker, an elderly man with sharp features and a stern demeanor, greeted me with a nod. He informed me that my host, Lord Blackwood, would meet me for dinner. Until then, I was free to explore the abbey, though he advised me to stay away from the West Wing. His words lingered in my mind as I wandered through the shadowy halls, feeling as if the very walls were watching me. The West Wing. The caretaker's warning had the opposite effect on me. It only fueled my curiosity. After a brief, restless nap, I decided to explore the forbidden wing before dinner. The corridors were even darker here, the air colder. As I walked, I noticed portraits of stern-faced ancestors lining the walls, their eyes seeming to follow my every move. At the end of the corridor, I found a door slightly ajar. Inside was a dimly lit room filled with dust-covered furniture and a large, ornate mirror on the wall. Something about the mirror caught my attention. It seemed out of place, almost too pristine compared to the rest of the room. As I approached it, I felt a chill run down my spine. I reached out to touch the mirror, and as my fingers brushed the surface, I saw a fleeting image, a pale figure standing behind me. I whirled around, but the room was empty. My heart raced as I backed away, convinced that the mirror was hiding more than just my reflection. Just as I turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind me. Panic set in, but before I could react, I heard footsteps approaching from the corridor outside. Breathing heavily, I managed to pry the door open and slip out just as the footsteps reached the room. I hurried back to my guest quarters, trying to compose myself before dinner. When the time came, I made my way to the grand dining hall, where Lord Blackwood awaited me. He was a tall, imposing figure with dark, brooding eyes that seemed to pierce through my very soul. Dinner was served, but the atmosphere was tense. Lord Blackwood asked about my journey and our shared family history, but his tone was distant, almost as if he was distracted by something else entirely. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was studying me, waiting for something. When I mentioned the West Wing, his expression darkened. "Stay away from that part of the Abbey," he warned, his voice low and ominous. "There are things there best left undisturbed." I nodded, but my mind was already racing. What was he hiding? And who was the figure I had seen in the mirror? The more I thought about it, the more determined I became to uncover the truth. After dinner, I returned to my quarters, but sleep eluded me. The Abbey's secrets were calling to me, and I knew I wouldn't rest until I had answers. That night, as I lay in bed, a soft knock echoed through my room. Startled, I sat up and looked toward the door. It creaked open slowly, revealing a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the figure move closer, its features obscured by the darkness. "Who's there?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The figure stepped into the dim light, revealing a young woman with pale skin and hauntingly sad eyes. She was dressed in an old-fashioned gown, the kind that hadn't been worn in decades. I could see right through her, and it dawned on me that I was face to face with a ghost. "Please," she said in a soft, pleading voice, "help me." Before I could respond, she turned and glided out of the room, disappearing into the corridor. I hesitated for a moment, then followed her, my fear momentarily forgotten. She led me back to the West Wing, to the same room with the mirror. This time, the door was wide open, and the room was filled with a strange, pale light. The ghost stood before the mirror, her hand outstretched. As I approached, she spoke again, her voice filled with sorrow. "I am Eleanor, the last of the Blackwood line. Betrayed and cursed, I am bound to this place. Only you can break the curse." I stared at her, my mind reeling. Eleanor's ghostly figure began to fade, but before she disappeared completely, she whispered one last word, trust. Then she was gone, leaving me alone in the room with the mirror and a mystery that now felt personal. The next morning, I couldn't shake the memory of my encounter with Eleanor. I needed to learn more about her and the curse she spoke of. I spent hours in the Abbey's library, sifting through old records, diaries, and letters. It was there that I discovered the tragic tale of Eleanor Blackwood. Eleanor had been the only daughter of Lord Blackwood's great-grandfather. She was known for her beauty and kindness, but her life had been cut short under mysterious circumstances. The family records hinted at a forbidden love affair with a commoner, which had brought shame upon the Blackwood name. In retaliation, her father had locked her away in the Abbey, where she eventually died of a broken heart. But there was more. I found a diary belonging to Eleanor hidden among the dusty tomes. In it, she wrote of a dark force that had taken hold of the Abbey, a malevolent spirit that had cursed her and her family. The curse, she claimed, would only be broken when someone from outside the family uncovered the truth and righted the wrongs that had been done. As I read her words, I felt a chill in the air, as if the Abbey itself was reacting to my discovery. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but I still didn't know how to break the curse. I needed to find out more about the dark force that had taken hold of the Abbey and what I could do to stop it. That night, I decided to confront Lord Blackwood. I found him in the study, surrounded by old books and papers. He looked up as I entered, his expression weary but guarded. I could tell that he had been expecting this conversation. Lord Blackwood, I began, I've learned about Eleanor and the curse. I need to know more. What is the dark force that haunts this place? For a moment he said nothing, his eyes fixed on the fire burning in the hearth. Then with a heavy sigh he began to speak. The force you speak of is a shadow that has plagued our family for generations, he said, his voice low. It is the spirit of a wronged ancestor, twisted by anger and hatred. When Eleanor fell in love with a commoner, my great-grandfather sought the help of this dark spirit to break them apart. In doing so, he bound our family to the curse. He paused, his eyes filled with regret. The curse has taken many forms over the years, misfortune, madness, and death. But Eleanor's spirit has suffered the most, trapped between this world and the next, unable to find peace. Only by facing the dark force and breaking its hold on the Abbey can the curse be lifted. I felt a surge of determination. How do we break the curse? Lord Blackwood shook his head. I don't know, but I believe it has something to do with the mirror in the West Wing. That mirror has always been a focal point of the dark force. Perhaps it holds the key. Armed with this new information, I returned to the room with the mirror, determined to uncover its secrets. The room was cold and still, the air thick with tension. I approached the mirror, feeling the weight of its presence. I could sense the dark force lurking just beyond the surface, waiting for me to make the first move. I stood before the mirror, searching for any sign of the dark force or a way to unlock its secrets. My reflection stared back at me, but there was something different, something unsettling. As I looked closer, I noticed that my reflection was not an exact match. It was subtly distorted, as if the mirror was trying to show me something else. I reached out to touch the mirror, and as my fingers made contact, the surface rippled like water. Suddenly, I was pulled into the mirror, into a dark, shadowy world that mirrored the Abbey, but was twisted and corrupted. I found myself standing in a version of the room that was decayed and crumbling, the air thick with malevolent energy. Before me stood a figure cloaked in darkness, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. I knew at once that this was the dark force that had haunted the Abbey for generations. It radiated hatred and anger, its presence suffocating. You have no power here, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I will break the curse and free Eleanor's spirit. The dark force laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. You think you can defeat me? You are nothing but a mortal, and I am eternal. But if you wish to try, then so be it. The room around me began to collapse, the walls crumbling into dust. I knew I had to act quickly. I focused on Eleanor, on her sorrow and her plea for help. I called out to her, willing her spirit to come to me. The dark force roared in anger as Eleanor's ghostly figure appeared beside me. her presence bringing a sense of calm and light to the dark, twisted world. She looked at me with gratitude and determination, ready to face the force that had tormented her for so long. Together we faced the dark force. It lashed out at us, trying to pull us apart, but we stood firm. I could feel its hatred and anger, its desire to destroy everything in its path. But I also felt Eleanor's strength, her resolve to end the curse and find peace. As the dark force attacked, I reached out and took Eleanor's hand. In that moment, I felt a surge of energy, a connection between us that was stronger than anything the dark force could muster. The room around us began to glow with a bright, purifying light, pushing back the darkness. The dark force screamed in rage as the light grew stronger, engulfing it completely. I could feel its power waning, its hold on the Abbey weakening. With one final burst of light, the dark force was shattered, its essence dissipating into the ether. The world around us began to return to normal, the twisted, decayed version of the Abbey fading away. Eleanor smiled at me, her form becoming more solid and real. She was finally free. As we returned to the real world, the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces, the curse broken at last. The Abbey, once shrouded in darkness and despair, was filled with light and warmth. The air was no longer heavy with malevolence. Instead, it was filled with a sense of peace and renewal. Lord Blackwood entered the room, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked at the shattered mirror and then at Eleanor, his expression softening. He knew that the curse had been lifted, that the dark force that had haunted his family for generations was finally gone. Eleanor's spirit, now free from the curse, began to fade. But before she disappeared completely, she turned to me and smiled. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You have given me peace." And with that, she was gone, leaving behind only a sense of serenity and closure. The days that followed were filled with a sense of relief and renewal. The Abbey, once a place of fear and sorrow, had become a sanctuary of peace and hope. Lord Blackwood and I worked together to restore the Abbey, honoring Eleanor's memory and the history of the Blackwood family. As I walked through the halls of the Abbey, I felt a deep connection to the place, a sense of belonging that I had never felt before. The curse was gone, and the dark force that had plagued the Blackwood family was no more. The Abbey was finally free, and so was I. I knew that I would stay at the Abbey, helping to preserve its history and share its stories with others. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led me to this point, to a place where I could find peace and purpose. As I stood at the entrance of the Abbey, looking out at the vast expanse of the Blackwood forest, I felt a sense of fulfillment. The curse was lifted, and the Abbey's legacy was secure. And as the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the land, I knew